Our first door does not open inside the palace. It opens hundreds of miles away, in the rolling countryside of what is now western Ukraine. There, sometime around the beginning of the 16th century, a young girl lived a life that history barely recorded. Even her birth name remains uncertain, though many later traditions identify her as Anastasia or Alexandra Lisowska. We cannot confirm every detail, and perhaps that uncertainty is fitting, because some of history's most influential people begin their journey in silence. One thing is almost universally accepted. Her life changed forever when raiders swept across her homeland. Thousands of men, women, and children were captured during these attacks and forced into the slave markets that supplied the Ottoman Empire. Imagine that moment. One sunrise, your world is familiar. By the next, everything has vanished. Family, home, language, future. It is here that our investigation truly begins, because every extraordinary story leaves us with the same question. Was this simply the beginning of an incredible rise? Or did destiny, coincidence, and human determination collide in ways that still seem almost impossible? After a long journey south, the young captive eventually arrived in Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Ottoman Empire. Nothing could have prepared her for what stood before her. Minarets pierced the skyline. Merchant ships crowded the Golden Horn. The scent of spices, incense, leather, and the sea drifted through streets alive with every language imaginable. At the center of it all stood Topkapı Palace, not merely a residence, but the beating heart of an empire stretching across 3 continents. Behind its walls lived thousands of people: soldiers, scholars, servants, cooks, physicians, eunuchs, craftsmen, administrators, royal children, and the women of the imperial harem. Today, many imagine the harem as little more than luxury and romance. The reality was far more demanding. It was an institution governed by discipline, education, etiquette, politics, and constant observation. Women studied languages, music, poetry, religion, diplomacy, and court protocol. Every gesture mattered. Every friendship could become an alliance. Every rivalry could become dangerous. It was here that the young captive received a new name, Hürrem, often translated as the joyful one or the smiling one. Contemporary observers later described her as lively, intelligent, quick-witted, and able to engage others in conversation with unusual warmth. Those qualities may sound ordinary today, but inside Topkapı Palace they could become extraordinary advantages. Yet, this is where our investigation pauses before accepting the obvious explanation. Was intelligence alone enough to transform a captive into the closest companion of Sultan Suleiman? Many modern historians believe her remarkable personality played a decisive role. But many people living at the time found that answer unsatisfying. They believed something far more mysterious was unfolding behind the palace walls. And so, before Hürrem had even become the most powerful woman in the empire, the first whispers had already begun. The first whispers did not begin with witches. They began with questions. Questions have always been more dangerous than answers because they force people to search for explanations. Why did the Sultan spend so much time with her? Why did he continue returning to her chambers when the harem was filled with women chosen from every corner of the empire? Why did a ruler known for discipline, military brilliance, and devotion begin breaking traditions that generations of Ottoman sultans had carefully preserved? No one inside Topkapı Palace could ignore what was happening. Servants carried trays through endless corridors lined with glowing oil lamps. Eunuchs guarded doors few people were permitted to approach. Ladies of the harem watched every glance, every smile, every unexpected visit. Palace physicians, tutors, scribes, and cooks all occupied different corners of the same living world. They rarely saw the entire picture, but each witnessed a small piece of it. Like fragments of colored glass, those pieces gradually formed stories. A servant noticed the Sultan requesting Hürrem's company again after an important council meeting. A guard observed high-ranking officials waiting outside while she remained alone with the ruler. A cook heard laughter coming from rooms that had once been silent. None of these moments proved anything extraordinary. Yet in places where power determines life and death, people naturally search for hidden meanings. Before long, conversations that began as simple observations transformed into speculation. Then speculation became whispers. Some believed Hürrem possessed an extraordinary gift for conversation, calming the Sultan after difficult decisions that involved war, diplomacy, or justice. Others insisted no words alone could explain such devotion. The whispers became more imaginative with every telling. There were stories of perfumes unlike any sold in Constantinople's great bazaars, fragrances said to contain rare flowers gathered from distant mountains or herbs prepared according to traditions brought from her homeland. Some claimed elderly women skilled in forgotten remedies secretly supplied these mixtures. Others spoke of embroidered silk pouches containing protective charms hidden beneath luxurious robes. There were tales that she understood dreams better than the palace astrologers, that she could recognize fortunate days from unfortunate ones, or that she carried blessings whispered in languages few people recognized. Did these things truly happen? We simply do not know. No surviving imperial document confirms such stories. Yet dismissing them without investigation would ignore an important truth about the 16th century. The Ottoman world, like much of Europe, was filled with sincere belief in unseen forces. People sought protection against the evil eye. Travelers carried amulets. Soldiers prayed before battle, and sometimes wore charms they believed offered divine protection. Astrologers advised rulers across many kingdoms. Herbal medicine, spiritual practices, religious devotion, and folk traditions often existed side by side. The boundary between accepted healing, sacred belief, and superstition was far less defined than many people imagine today. This matters because it changes how we understand the whispers. To modern ears, talk of enchanted perfumes or protective charms may sound impossible. But to someone living inside Topkapı Palace 500 years ago, such stories belonged to a world they already understood. They were not necessarily viewed as fantasy. They were possibilities discussed in quiet voices among people trying to explain extraordinary events. Then another group entered the story, the foreign ambassadors. Venetian envoys, whose governments depended upon understanding Ottoman politics, watched every movement inside the palace with remarkable attention. Their reports describe Hürrem as intelligent, cheerful, persuasive, and unusually influential. Yet even these experienced diplomats admitted much of what they learned came through intermediaries, servants, merchants, and court informants. They recorded not only facts but also the atmosphere surrounding the palace, where admiration mixed freely with suspicion and rumor often traveled faster than certainty. Reading their letters today, one senses that Europe itself struggled to understand what was unfolding. How could an enslaved woman rise so high? How could one person alter centuries of imperial custom? Perhaps intelligence truly explained everything. Perhaps love did. Or perhaps people simply found those answers too ordinary for such an extraordinary story. Whatever the reason, one thing is undeniable. By the time Hürrem became the Sultan's legal wife, the whispers had escaped the palace. They drifted through the markets of Constantinople, crossed the Mediterranean inside diplomatic correspondence, and reached the royal courts of Europe. A legend had begun its journey through history. But as every explorer knows, legends rarely survive for centuries unless they are fed by something more than imagination. And when we open our next door, we will discover the event that caused those whispers to grow louder than ever before. An event involving a beloved prince, a grieving empire, and accusations that continue to divide historians, storytellers, and explorers to this very day. Every investigation has a moment when the atmosphere changes. For Hürrem Sultan, that moment came with a growing shadow surrounding Prince Mustafa. To understand why his story became inseparable from hers, we must first understand the terrifying reality of the Ottoman throne. Unlike many European kingdoms, there was no simple law declaring that the eldest son would automatically inherit the empire. Every prince represented a possible future sultan, and every prince also represented a possible rival. History had shown again and again that succession disputes could tear the empire apart. Brothers had fought brothers. Armies had chosen sides. Provinces had burned. Thousands had died. Inside Topkapı Palace, everyone understood that the question of succession was not merely a family matter. It was the future of one of the most powerful empires on earth. Prince Mustafa was admired by many. Soldiers respected him. Experienced commanders believed he possessed the qualities of a capable ruler. Contemporary observers often described him as courageous, intelligent, and popular among both the military and the people. To many, he appeared to be the natural successor to Sultan Suleiman. Yet popularity can become a dangerous companion when it grows inside a royal court. The more support Mustafa attracted, the more every conversation about the future of the empire became charged with uncertainty. Here the investigation becomes difficult, because this is where history and whispers begin walking side by side. Some surviving accounts suggest influential officials feared that factions within the empire might attempt to place Mustafa on the throne before Suleiman's death. Other accounts argue those fears were exaggerated. Some chroniclers believed powerful advisors manipulated the sultan's suspicions. Others believed genuine concerns existed about loyalty and rebellion. Even today, historians continue debating exactly what Suleiman knew, when he knew it, and who influenced his judgment. But outside the official records, another story was spreading. In the coffee houses of Constantinople, where merchants, travelers, and storytellers exchanged the latest gossip, people began asking a different question. If Prince Mustafa stood between Hürrem's sons and the throne, who truly benefited from his downfall? That single question ignited whispers that have echoed for nearly 5 centuries. Some accused Hürrem of quietly persuading the sultan against the prince. Others insisted she worked alongside powerful officials determined to reshape the line of succession. A few stories became even darker, claiming that her influence over Suleiman could not possibly have been achieved through intelligence alone. Once again, old rumors returned with renewed strength. They spoke of mysterious fragrances drifting through her private chambers, of herbal mixtures known only to women from distant lands, of blessings whispered in forgotten languages, and of charms carefully hidden within embroidered fabrics. The stories grew with every retelling. Some swore palace servants refused to enter her rooms alone after nightfall. Others claimed guards crossed themselves, or recited protective prayers, depending on their own traditions, before approaching certain corridors. Can any of these stories be proven? No surviving evidence confirms them. But neither can we ignore the fact that versions of these whispers endured for generations, becoming part of the larger legend surrounding Hürrem Sultan. As explorers, our task is not to decide too quickly. It is to ask why such stories survived when countless others disappeared. Were they political propaganda designed to destroy an influential woman? Were they expressions of grief from people struggling to understand the death of a beloved prince? Did they reflect the widespread belief in charms, omens, and unseen forces that shaped everyday life during the 16th century? Or were they preserving fragments of conversations and experiences that official court records never captured? There is another possibility worth considering. Throughout history, women who exercised extraordinary influence have often been described in extraordinary ways. Some were called saints. Others were called witches. Some were remembered as healers. Others were feared as manipulators. Perhaps those labels tell us as much about the societies that created them as they do about the women themselves. Yet Hürrem's story refuses to settle so easily. She built charitable foundations, hospitals, schools, and public kitchens that served the poor. She exchanged letters with foreign rulers. She helped shape the cultural life of the Ottoman court. These are documented achievements. At the same time, the whispers surrounding her never disappeared. Instead, they became woven into her legacy, creating 2 Hürrems who continue to exist side by side. One lives within imperial documents, diplomatic correspondence, and surviving architecture. The other walks through legend, palace gossip, local tradition, and stories still told centuries later. Which Hürrem is the real one? Perhaps both contain pieces of the truth. Or perhaps the answer lies somewhere between history and memory, waiting for another generation of explorers to uncover. But before we leave Topkapı Palace, one final door remains unopened. Behind it lies the question that has divided scholars, storytellers, and visitors alike. When we strip away the politics, the accusations, and the legends, who was Hürrem Sultan really, and why has time refused to silence the whispers that still surround her name? Our expedition has now reached its final chamber. The palace grows quiet. The footsteps of soldiers have long since faded. The council meetings have ended. The candles that once illuminated the corridors of Topkapı Palace have burned out centuries ago. Yet one thing refuses to disappear. The whispers. They still linger, carried not by servants this time, but by historians, travelers, local guides, novelists, filmmakers, and explorers like us who continue searching for the woman behind the legend. So let us gather everything we have discovered and lay it carefully upon the table. The official records tell us that Hürrem Sultan was one of the most influential women in Ottoman history. She became the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman, something almost unheard of in the imperial tradition. She corresponded with foreign rulers. She commissioned magnificent mosques, schools, hospitals, baths, and charitable foundations that still stand today. Contemporary ambassadors repeatedly described her intelligence, confidence, and extraordinary influence over the Sultan. None of those achievements require magic to explain them. Yet history is rarely built from official records alone. Alongside the documents walked another history, one carried by memory rather than ink. Palace servants repeated stories they had heard but could never prove. Travelers carried rumors from one city to another until they became accepted truth in places hundreds of miles away. Storytellers added details with every generation, weaving mysterious perfumes, forgotten herbs, enchanted charms, and whispered rituals into the life of a woman who had already become larger than life. Some of those stories almost certainly grew with time. Others may preserve genuine fears experienced by people who lived through those extraordinary years. We simply cannot separate every thread after 5 centuries. Then there is the question every explorer eventually asks. Why Hürrem? Why have so many legends attached themselves to her name while countless other powerful women slowly disappeared into history? Perhaps because people have always struggled to explain individuals who seem to change the course of events against every expectation. Throughout history, when an ordinary explanation feels too small, extraordinary explanations often take its place. Sometimes those explanations become myths. Sometimes they become propaganda. Sometimes they become cautionary tales. And sometimes they become legends that refuse to die because they speak to something deeper than facts alone. They reveal what people feared, admired, envied, or hoped might be possible. There is another possibility worth considering. Imagine living inside Topkapı Palace without access to modern history books, archaeology, or 5 centuries of hindsight. Imagine hearing that the Sultan had abandoned long-established traditions for one woman. Imagine watching powerful officials lose influence while her voice seemed to grow stronger with every passing year. Imagine hearing servants speak in hushed voices about strange fragrances drifting through private chambers or elderly women carrying bundles of herbs through hidden corridors. Would you have dismissed those stories? Or would you have believed, as many people of your own time believed, that unseen forces could shape human destiny? We cannot honestly answer that question because we no longer see the world through 16th century eyes. But perhaps understanding that world, rather than judging it, brings us closer to the truth than choosing either complete belief or complete skepticism. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson Hürrem Sultan leaves behind. History is not always a battle between truth and fiction. More often, it is a conversation between evidence, memory, belief, politics, fear, and the stories people refuse to let go. Sometimes archaeology settles the debate. Sometimes newly discovered letters rewrite what we thought we knew. Sometimes science uncovers answers hidden for centuries. And sometimes the mystery remains, not because history has failed us, but because human lives are too complex to fit neatly into a single explanation. So before we leave these palace walls, we hand the final key to you, explorer. We have opened every door we could find. We have followed the official records. We have listened to the ambassadors. We have walked beside the whispers. We have respected the local traditions. We have examined the accusations. Now the final question belongs to you. If you had stood inside Topkapı Palace in the year 1545, would you have seen Hürrem Sultan as an extraordinary woman whose intelligence changed an empire? A political strategist willing to do whatever was necessary to protect her family? A victim of one of history's greatest campaigns of rumor? Or someone whose story still holds mysteries that history has yet to explain? Whatever your answer, remember this. Every great expedition ends by opening another door. And perhaps the next clue is waiting not inside an archive, but inside a forgotten letter, an archaeological discovery, an old family story, or a whisper that has survived because someone believed it was too important to forget. As we step beyond the great gates of Topkapı Palace, the evening air feels strangely different. Perhaps it is because places like this never truly allow us to leave empty-handed. We arrived searching for the truth about one remarkable woman, yet we leave carrying something far greater than an answer. We leave with questions. Questions that have echoed through these halls for nearly 5 centuries. Was Hürrem Sultan simply one of the most intelligent women ever to enter the Ottoman court? Did political rivals transform an extraordinary rise into stories of witchcraft because they could not accept that brilliance, resilience, and determination might be enough? With the whispered tales of enchanted perfumes, hidden charms, mysterious herbs, and unseen forces nothing more than the fears of a court where power could change hands with a single conversation? Or did those whispers preserve fragments of a forgotten world whose beliefs we no longer fully understand? We may never know. And perhaps that is exactly why her story continues to captivate explorers from every corner of the world. Throughout history, countless mysteries have eventually surrendered to new discoveries. Lost civilizations once dismissed as legend have emerged beneath forests and deserts. Ancient cities have been uncovered beneath ordinary homes. Royal secrets have resurfaced through forgotten letters, archaeological excavations, and advances in science that previous generations could never have imagined. History is never completely finished. Every generation receives another opportunity to reopen old investigations with fresh eyes. That is why, here at Tilt and Chill, we will never ask you to simply accept one version of the past. We invite you to examine the evidence, listen to the local traditions, consider the whispers, respect the discoveries, and then decide for yourself where the truth may lie. Some expeditions end with certainty, others end with possibility. We believe both are worth exploring. Before our paths cross again, we leave you with one final explorer's question. If you had lived inside Topkapı Palace, surrounded by powerful rulers, ambitious courtiers, whispered accusations, mysterious traditions, and stories that blurred the line between politics and the supernatural, would you have believed Hürrem Sultan possessed extraordinary powers? Or would you have searched for another explanation hidden behind the palace walls? Share your thoughts below, because every expedition becomes richer when explorers compare discoveries. You never know whose memory, family tradition, book, journey, or perspective might reveal a piece of the puzzle that others have overlooked. If this investigation awakened your curiosity, then your journey has only just begun. There are forgotten castles whose stones still carry whispered legends. Underground cities that remained hidden for centuries before the modern world stumbled upon them. Kingdoms once dismissed as myth until archaeology proved they had truly existed. Mountains where ancient pilgrims still follow traditions no one fully understands. Forests where local stories continue to outlive official explanations. Palaces where history and legend still walk the same corridors. Together, we will continue opening those doors. We will follow evidence wherever it leads. We will listen carefully to the voices history preserved, and to the whispers it almost lost. Until our next expedition, remain curious, ask difficult questions, respect both discovery and tradition, and never stop exploring beyond the obvious. Because somewhere in the world tonight, another forgotten mystery is still waiting for someone curious enough to begin the journey.